Well, hello everyone. Welcome to our merger control webinar focusing on the MENA region. We are really excited for you to join us. We have participants from various countries of the world, so it's good afternoon and good morning for some countries. I'm going to start the introduction a little bit slow just to allow people to join in. But we're really happy for you to join in this live webinar where we'll be discussing everything about merger control. The way we wanted to set up this webinar was more of an interactive discussion as well, but more of a comparative style where we will discuss certain topics of merger control and then run you through how it is handled and dealt in each jurisdiction. I'll start now to introduce you to our wonderful, great lineup of speakers for our competition team. We have Omar Obeidat from our UAE practice. He heads the IP department and is the co-head of the competition team regionally. Omar is heavily involved with the authorities as well in merger control matters. We have Dr. Khaled Attia, partner and head of the dispute resolution practice, and he's also the co-head of the competition practice in our region. Dr. Khaled was the previous executive director of Egyptian Competition Authority, heavily involved as well in competition. We have Chris Webb from our Saudi team, partner in our corporate team, and has a number of merger control filings under his belt and extremely active in the region. And we have finally, we left for our wonderful new addition to our office, which is Morocco. We have Roudane from our Morocco office, partner and head of the Moroccan office. We're really happy because Morocco is our latest new crown jewel addition to the Tamimi family. So we're really, really happy to have Nesrine on board and a Moroccan team. So that makes the MENA region really something that we look forward to covering. We now have a bit more of attendees now adding up. So I think that we can start our session. My name is Mariam Sabet. I'm a member of the competition team based in Dubai. I'll be your moderator today. And well, we'll start right away. So now when we talk about the merger control, we have the most common question that always comes from clients is thresholds. So the clients normally ask us, what is the threshold for notifying in your jurisdiction and in your country? So it's a simple question as it sounds. So I'll start the floor with the UAE because different regions have different thresholds such as revenue and market share. So let us start with the UAE. Omar, tell us about the thresholds in the UAE.
Thank you, Mariam. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thresholds for merger control in the UAE sound straightforward. If you have, as a result of the transaction or prior to the transaction, acquired 40% market share or above, then you are subject to submitting an application for economic concentration. That's simply put. Obviously, the issue gets complicated to look at the relevant market that is calculated in the market share, or where it becomes an issue of a disruptor company that, yes, may not trigger the 40% right now in terms of total number of market share, but the acquirer is a disruptor or in the field of technology that can quickly acquire market share. So the combination can in a short period of time exceed the threshold. These are in a way looked at on a case-by-case basis. The straightforward question that you would want to rule out is, am I subject to the 40% market share or not?
Okay, thank you, Omar. All right, Dr. Khaled, tell us about Egypt.
Thank you, Mariam. And in Egypt as well, it is a straightforward threshold. According to Article 19 of the Egyptian competition law, the threshold is the annual turnover of the preceding year that is 100 million EGP or above. In that case, the companies party to the transaction, they have a notification to, they have an obligation to notify the competition authority with this transaction.
And Dr. Khaled, allow me to follow here. And I understand different than from the UAE because it's a pre-merger notification regime. In Egypt, I understand it's a post-merger notification, right?
Yes, exactly. It is a post-merger notification. However, this is subject to review now by the Parliament, since we have new amendments to the law that are introduced to the Parliament a year ago. And I believe by end of this year, we'll have a pre-merger notification regime as well.
Fantastic. Chris, how about Saudi?
Thank you, Mariam. A notification obligation exists in Saudi Arabia where a transaction results in a change of control and the combined global turnover of the parties to the economic concentration exceed 100 million Saudi Arabian rial, which is about 26.67 million US dollars, so quite a low turnover threshold, and there is a sufficient nexus to Saudi Arabia. Now, a nexus to Saudi Arabia will mean a presence in Saudi Arabia through a branch or subsidiary, or it will mean that there's sufficient revenues being earned in Saudi Arabia to have an effect on a Saudi market. So there's no exemption for pure foreign-to-foreign transactions. They are caught by the notification threshold as well in some circumstances.
Thank you, Chris. And finally, with Nesrine and Morocco.
Merci beaucoup, Mariam. Bonjour tout le monde. So in Morocco, when it comes to merger control, it's a little bit complicated because we adopted the 3 criteria. So whenever we have a transaction that meets one of the 3 criteria, the notification is required. So the first criteria is the one concerning the worldwide turnover of all businesses or companies involved is equal or exceed 750 million. The second one is the turnover from the Moroccan source for the businesses involved is here equal or exceeds 250 million. And the third one is when the businesses involved or related represent more than 40% of the market or substantial part of it. So the only exception that will be put forth by the Moroccan regulator is concerning the foreign-to-foreign merger transaction. But again, here the decision belongs to the Competition Council, and this issue needs to be addressed by the Competition Council.
Okay, thank you, Nesrine. And from what we could conclude from this initial part is that UAE has a market share threshold for notification, and the rest of the countries, Egypt, granted its post-merger, but it's more on turnover basis. So this would be the different type of notification. Now, I'd like to move to an important topic, Nesrine, that you were just discussing about foreign-to-foreign transactions, because we've had a lot of queries from clients, especially with a lot of focus on the Moroccan Competition Authority, that have been recently fining companies that have been subjecting to EU merger control, and they file notifications in the EU. These companies are considered transactions that are foreign-to-foreign transactions, but yet they have actually fined these companies for not filing in Morocco. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Thank you, Mariam. This is an excellent question. Actually, the Competition Council in Morocco interprets the requirements concerning the control quite broadly. So as a matter of fact, when it comes to foreign transaction, we have 2 exemptions. The first one is that the target did not achieve any revenues or had no presence in Morocco and had no plan to expand in Morocco. The second one concerns the acquirer where no activity is existing in Morocco, including via the subsidiaries or other controlled companies, and on the same sector. But when you take into consideration the criteria that is provided by the legislature, you will end to the consequence that logically, if both criteria are met, the filing should be ruled out. But as a matter of fact, in recent decision by the Competition Council, it has been proved the contrary, and also this has been specified in the latest report of the Moroccan Council. So the legal criterion even though it's not met, you need to notify the Moroccan Competition Council based just on the fact that that company may have that merge may have an impact on the Moroccan market. So as such, we usually adopt a cautious approach where we recommend to file a transaction, even though we are convinced that we don't meet any of the threshold, but we don't take the chance or the risk to be heavily fined. And this happened just recently, where a transaction, we had the first case of gun jumping in Morocco, and in this matter, a fine of over €1 million was decided by the Moroccan Council. So I strongly recommend to abide by the regulation and to adopt a cautious approach.
Thank you, Nesrine. Yes, please go ahead.
Because the worst case scenario, the case will be cleared within 60 days. So it's worth it at the end of the day.
And actually, I had a question about that point. Is there a difference when you say filing, is it a full-fledged filing? When you have doubts on foreign to foreigns, it is a full-fledged filing.
Yeah, it is the case. So here again, it is detailed by the Moroccan regulator, but also detailed by the Competition Council. It's quite a heavy file, I have to admit, but I think at the end of the day, it is worth respecting it, not taking the chance to be fined.
Yes, definitely. We got it. No chances taken in Morocco then. Okay, great. I would move to Saudi because Chris, we were preparing in the prep time, we were preparing, and I've heard some stories about what's happening in Saudi in terms of foreign to foreign. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, thanks, Mariam. The authority has been quite active in calling in transactions that it felt should have been notified but weren't, and we're aware of a number of foreign to foreign transactions, that is transactions with where the parties have no presence in Saudi Arabia through a branch or subsidiary, that have been called in. A number of those have been subjected to a formal legal investigation, and at least one of those has been referred by the board of the authority for prosecution. That prosecution is underway. We don't have a final judgment yet, or any result from it yet. It's being defended, but certainly foreign to foreign transactions are in the sights of the authority, in addition to local transactions.
Wow, thank you, Chris, for that. And Dr. Khaled, what would be the situation in Egypt?
Yes, thank you, Mariam, for that. Actually, foreign to foreign transactions are notifiable in Egypt if they meet the threshold, meaning that if they are achieving an annual turnover in Egypt or out of Egypt that meets the threshold, then they have an obligation to notify. This was confirmed by the guidelines issued by the Competition Authority in 2018, where they stated clearly if the annual turnover of one of the parties to the transaction or both parties to the transaction reach 100 million EGP or more from the Egyptian market, then they have an obligation to notify, even if they are not present in Egypt.
Thank you, Dr. Khaled. And I understand that you've mentioned earlier that the law, there are expected to be changes in the law. Do you think this is something that's going to be addressed? Is it a controversial issue in Egypt? Would it be addressed specifically in the new law?
Yes, I believe that I already have a copy of the draft amendments, and this is addressed under the new amendments, especially foreign to foreign, and the threshold is higher than the local threshold. So if it is a foreign to foreign, then the threshold would be 7.5 billion EGP worldwide annual turnover, or combined assets of the companies. Or if they have an achieved annual turnover from the Egyptian market that exceeds 200 million EGP. So in that case, it is a notifiable transaction under Egyptian law.
Dr. Khaled, I'll ask you to take your other hat because of your previous position as the executive director of the Competition Authority in Egypt. bear with us here a little bit. Were these matters that were discussed with the Competition Council, especially on foreign to foreign? Give us some insights.
Yes, actually, that was always a debate. All the companies, they come and they say, we have no presence in Egypt, and accordingly, we don't have an obligation to notify. Yes, it is still a post-notification regime, but there is an obligation under the law. And you keep telling them that the law did not differentiate between foreign to foreign and domestic or local transactions, provided that they meet the threshold. And the threshold is 100 million EGP annual turnover achieved in Egypt. So if it is a foreign to foreign, okay, and they have no presence and they have no operations in Egypt, that's fine. You are not subject to notification. However, if you have an annual turnover achieved out of Egypt, out of the Egyptian market, then you have a notification to, you have an obligation to notify, even if you have no presence in Egypt.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Khaled. And Omar, in the UAE, I know that you are very active with the authorities in discussion on various matters that are not covered under UAE law. Can you tell us what would be the position in the UAE?
Well, ideally, the authority would like to have much more control and a broader jurisdiction over applications submitted for economic concentration. So really the competition department sees the current legislation as being restrictive in their power. So as the test does not include annual turnover, it only covers market share. Foreign to foreign transactions doesn't really give the authority room for intervention. What they have seen, however, or what they're saying is that, of course, they will, this is on top of their agenda for any anticipated changes to the law, but also when there's change of hands involved. So it's not a foreign to foreign transaction. Such one of the parties does have market share in the UAE and there's a merely change of hands, they still subject this to economic control, economic concentration review, and the practice is that they are receiving applications that merely have change of hands.
Thank you, Omar. Our next topic, and if anyone would like to ask the questions, we have a nice Q&A box here, so we'll definitely take your questions afterwards. I've moved to a question that is not very popular, and we get it a lot, and it's important to discuss, which is the topic of timelines. Timeline is one of the things that we always have being asked to us, and how long will this take? Can we proceed with the transaction and close anyway, despite not obtaining approval? So I think we want to talk a little bit about timeline, how rigid it is it strict according to each jurisdiction? And let me start here with Chris. Let us know a little bit about the Saudi timeline for approval.
Thanks, Mariam. The timings to clearance in Saudi Arabia have been coming down steadily since the new law came into effect in September 2019. In 2019, it was quite common for filings to take a number of months to obtain clearance. But this year, the average timing to clearance from the date of first filing has been in the sort of 7 to 9 week range. We have achieved some clearances in as little as 3.5 weeks. In sensitive sectors such as healthcare, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, they can take a bit longer than the 7 to 9 weeks, so 10 or 11 weeks. There is a deemed clearance after 90 days from the payment of the filing fee, but we have never ever had a filing go the full 90 days from payment of the filing fee. Clearance is always obtained within much earlier than that. We had a meeting with the authority a few months back, and they told us that their goal that they are working towards is to get the timing to clearance from the date of first filing down to 20 days from filing in most cases, and they've been steadily working towards that goal. So we're at about 7 to 9 weeks now, and hopefully by the end of the year it'll be quicker again.
And Chris, question here. When you say the timeline starts, when does it start? Does it start when you comply with all formalities? When does the clock start?
The statutory review period commences when you've paid the filing fee, and the invoice for the filing fee will typically not be issued until after the reviewer is satisfied that all formalities have been supplied. But practice differs between reviewers as to when the invoice for the filing fee is issued. Some reviewers issue it right after filing upon an inspection of the documents. Other reviewers have adopted the practice of issuing the invoice for the filing fee at a very late stage, many weeks after they've become satisfied that the filing is complete. This may have something to do with internal KPIs within the authority. So the metric that we use is, for keeping track of timings, is the number of weeks from the date of first filing, simply because practice in relation to issuing the invoice for the filing fee and triggering the 90-day statutory review period varies between reviewers.
And Chris, one more thing, because I thought that was really interesting when we were doing joint merger filings in one transaction, is that in Saudi, you don't need to translate certain documents, especially the SPA. Is that still the case?
Yes, that's another of the reforms that's been brought in an effort to shorten the timing to clearance. It used to be the case back in 2019 that everything had to be supplied in Arabic, even the accounts of the parties, which was enormously time consuming and expensive. These days, the authority will accept almost all documents in English or Arabic. So if the documents are in English, the corporate documents, that is, the articles, the commercial registration, the accounts, the authority will accept them in English. The only documents that need to be supplied in Arabic are the filing form itself and the powers of attorney.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. I think that definitely Saudi is a good benchmark when it comes to easing the formalities. And I'm just going to jump to Omar here because we've worked together on a number of transactions in the UAE, and the filing and the timeline is a bit burdensome. And Omar, do you think that could change? But if you can give us a little bit first of view on how burdensome it is a bit on the formalities part.
Well, the formalities in terms of requests, if you want to go by the book, it is very tedious. Everything must be translated to Arabic. Everything must be legalized. You're talking about financial statements. You're talking about very lengthy documents when there's a big structure of corporate incorporation certificates. And really, there is no need for that. Most of the economists really review the financial statements in their original English language. I mean, there are examples and solutions, and really those come from economists in their commenting on the current practice and law. Sometimes the hands of the legal advisor at the competition department or the director of the competition department is tied by saying, the regulation is very specific that it requires translation legalization. I think the competition authority have been flexible enough and sensible in dealing with this. Yes, the law is rigid. It requires a very tedious process, but they have been to a certain extent flexible. The issue is, I think the law has given too much flexibility in terms of time frame. It allows for 90 days for the authority to come back with an answer, and this can be extended by another 45 days. So you're talking about 4 months and a half. That's a long period. I haven't seen a transaction that we've handled that went up to 4 months and a half. But the difficulty is not in the 4 months and a half total period. The difficulty is, when does the calculation period start? And it starts when you receive an official confirmation in writing from the competition authority saying your application is now complete, we will start reviewing it. So if you submitted your application, followed up with a POA that's legalized, came back with a financial statement that was translated, and several weeks have gone through, that doesn't mean those weeks are counted within the 90 days. No, until you receive a final confirmation in writing saying you've passed the formality test, and therefore we will start reviewing. This is when the 90-day count starts. So you have to be aware of that, and you have to be chasing the authority to get that confirmation.
And Omar, I remember in one of, actually the most burdensome one was that the financial statements were required to be legalized. And that was actually a big issue. And it actually delayed a number of, it was a big hurdle for the transaction. And on that point, I hope that there will be reforms in the new law, and we will come to the section of what are the anticipated changes. But I want to check with Dr. Khaled here, because we were talking while preparing on as well timeline and the importance of early competition analysis. So Dr. Khaled, can you give us a little bit your insights on this?
Thank you, Mariam. In Egypt, as you mentioned earlier, that it is a post-notification regime whereby the transaction has to be notified to the competition authority within 30 days from the conclusion of the transaction. And again, it is debatable what is the date the transaction is considered concluded. However, it's the practice before the competition authority that like the transfer of shares, that would be the date of concluding the transaction, and accordingly you have to calculate 30 days from that day. And this is clear in the guidelines that were being issued by the competition authority in 2018. Again, there is no time limit for the competition authority to come back, but the practice again shows in Egypt that if they don't come back within 30 days asking for additional documents, then the transaction is considered notified properly according to the law. One thing to mention here, that the notification has to be in Arabic again, as Omar mentioned. In UAE, in Egypt, it's the same thing. We have a notification form that has to be filled in Arabic. However, the annexes to the application form can be in English or in any other language accompanied with Arabic translation if it is not in English. So, and it doesn't have to be legalized. The only thing that you just provide the documents and to be stamped by the parties of the transaction, be it the acquirer stamp or so. So this is the case in Egypt. However, I have to say, and even before we reach the question regarding the changes, that these are all subject to review by the parliament now in order to introduce the new pre-merger approval regime.
Thank you, Dr. Khaled. Before we move to Morocco, it does seem that Saudi would probably take a better approach in terms of burdensome requirements, and they are easing it. Egypt follows that by allowing not to have legalization. UAE is still on the very strict approach on the legalization aspect of it. I'd be really interested to hear about Morocco in terms of timeline and formalities. How is it going there?
Thank you, Mariam. This is actually a very important question, and thank you for asking it, because unfortunately, it is very often neglected during the negotiation, while I will say it is almost mandatory to allocate proper time to abide by the regulation and seek the requested approval. So I will try to be as concise as possible, but also as thorough as possible about the procedure here in Morocco. So please bear with me. So in Morocco, there is at least one phase to be conducted. So when you notify, after the notification of the merger to the Moroccan Council will have 60 days to analyze the deal during the phase one. This phase one, we call it examen préliminaire. Most of the cases are resolved in phase one, generally without remedies. That's why I strongly recommend to conduct the notification, even though you consider that you don't meet one of the three thresholds that we spoke about earlier. So during this phase one, the council will keep, of course, the merchant companies informed about the progress of the analysis, but the council has the power to request for information from the merchant company or third parties. The council can address questionnaire to the competitor or consumers. The council can also contact other market participants to inquire. So at the end, during this period, if one of the party requests to provide more information, the delay of 60 days will be extended by 20 days. Mm-hmm. So at the end of this period, that can be at the end of 80 days, there are two main conclusions. Whether the first one, the merger is cleared, either unconditionally or subject to accepted remedies, or the second possibility is the merger still raises competition concerns, and the council here opens what we call the phase 2. The phase 2 is called examen approfondi, and this is where the nightmare will begin. So the phase 2 is more in-depth analysis of the merger effect on the Moroccan market, and this phase will require more time. So the duration of this phase is 90 days that can be suspended by one of the parties for a period of 30 days, or it can be also suspended by the competition council, and here the law doesn't provide for a period of time. So at the end of this period, we will have one of the three decisions. Either the competition council will authorize with or without remedies, or will refuse during the period of 90 days that we said can be extended. And the competition council in that case will inform the administration. The Moroccan administration here will have a period of 30 days to discuss the matter. Following this, the transaction will be deemed authorized. So you see, Mariam, it is a very lengthy process during which you need to provide documents, a lot of documents, a lot of information. Let's suppose that it's a foreign to foreign transaction and most of the documentation is in English. Mm-hmm. So you need to translate it into French, and you need to take this into consideration. So I cannot stress enough about the absolute necessity to allocate a proper time for this.
Thank you, Nesrine. Wow. I mean, we hope most transactions stay on the preliminary stage, not the approfondi, examen approfondi. We'd like to stay away from that, obviously.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. And that's why I strongly recommend to conduct the notification, because you will have the cooperation of the competition council. And once you explain everything clearly, most of the cases are cleared within the period of 60 days.
Okay, perfect. So you mentioned something that I really wanted to stop here on remedies. Because remedies is a point where, for example, in the UAE, there are no really examples yet of authorities granting remedies. What is the position of the Moroccan authority? Do they tend to give a lot of remedies, and are these structural remedies or behavioral remedies, in your view?
So Mariam, this is a good question, and quite frankly, the Competition Council is very cooperative and flexible when it comes to remedies, as long as you show that you are acting in good faith and you are cooperating. And as a matter of fact, you have both categories of remedies, whether they are structural or behavioral. They are provided by the law and they are implemented by the Moroccan Competition Council. And you can adjust this, taking into consideration the operation. I will say that preparation and communication are.
Thank you. And one more thing, Nesrine, I promise, on the topic here of formalities. Do you have the same formality, burdensome requirements that we have, for example, in the UAE?
Yes, absolutely. So when it comes to formalities, So the initial parts of the formalities are provided and are set in the legal text, but also in the decrees and also in the guide that are provided by the Competition Council. But and another positive thing is that you have the publication of all the decision, etc. So you can check what is the current practice of the Competition Council, what they are expecting, and adjust. But it is very heavy. Yeah? You need time to prepare this. You cannot do it overnight.
Yes, yes. Perfect. Thank you, Nesrine, for that. And Chris, we were talking a bit about legalization, and I think you wanted to add a point about Saudi.
Yes, thanks, Mariam. Along with the willingness to accept all documents other than the filing form itself and the powers of attorney in English, the authority has also abolished legalization requirements for all documents other than the powers of attorney. The powers of attorney still have to be legalized. That is long form legalization, so execution before a notary, stamping at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then further stamping at the Saudi Embassy in the country of origin. However, all that will change in December this year when Saudi Arabia accedes to the Apostille Convention, which should speed up the legalization process.
Wow, that's great news. Thank you, Chris. And another point that we really wanted to, because Nesrine had mentioned something that was interesting, is publishing of decisions. So it seems in Morocco, Nesrine, it does seem that there's a lot of transparency, and largely because, as you've mentioned before during our prep, that it's largely derived and influenced the competition authority from the French competition authority. And so there's a lot of transparency and decisions published. I can't say that we have the same in UAE, and I'll jump to Omar on this, but then want to take as well Egypt and Saudi's view on publishing decisions. And Omar, tell me what is the position now in the UAE?
Well, really, if you look at the map, publishing is not easy generally in the Middle East, just because the authorities are careful not to publish something that's not final. So in Saudi Arabia, for example, they are publishing when a final decision is issued. What they're doing right now is just notifying of a suspected violation under the law by mentioning the sector. In the UAE, there have been no publishing to date. Nothing whatsoever, not even on the competition department's website, not in news media, anything. The authority refuses to share any information or announce any information of even which sectors they are investigating or which sector a certain violator belongs to. When you look at other successful models, I mean, I liked Kuwait as the most interesting model. The Competition Protection Authority in Kuwait is publishing every merger control application when it's submitted to them and when it is approved. So they're very transparent. They share sufficient information. You'll understand based on the publication the number of applications they process per year. You will understand the sectors, the name of the companies. You will understand whether this is a foreign-to-foreign transaction or not. So you really have better data that you can collect based on the publications of the competition department. I think this is an area that the UAE can certainly improve, and the authority, from speaking to them, they would agree with us and do say that yes, they think the practice of publishing brings much more awareness to the UAE competition law and authority, but also is useful for enriching the competition jurisprudence and the competition legal ecosystem in the UAE. So they're pro-publication. However, they're too cautious, and they want their legislation to be amended again. That would give them freedom of publishing information, whether related to violations or information related to applications for economic concentration.
Okay, thank you, Omar. And in Egypt, Dr. Khaled, what's the position on publishing decisions?
Thank you, Mariam. Actually, the Competition Authority has an obligation by law to issue an annual report with all the activities that they have conducted over the past year. And accordingly, all the major notifications that have been submitted to the Competition Authority are notified. But as is the case with the UAE, and as Omar mentioned, that it is always difficult to get any information from the Competition Authority. They do not give like analysis or the number of foreign-to-foreign notifications, for example, or the affiliates to these merging companies. They just mention the sector, the names of the companies, and that they were submitted on that date. This is all the information you can get in the annual reports of the Competition Authority. However, the deep analysis of each transaction is not provided, neither by press releases or announcements, or even in the annual report of the Competition Authority.
Thank you, Dr. Khaled.
However, I think this would be changing soon with the adoption of the new amendments to the law, because they have to give certain guidance and they have to make these announcements when they receive notifications for pre-approvals.
Thank you, Dr. Khaled. And Chris, in Saudi, is it going to get more publishing?
Thanks, Mariam. The clearances are published on the authority's website and their Twitter feed, but the publication is very brief. It's just the names of the parties and the fact of the clearance, and a short one-line description of the transaction, such as acquisition by party A of party B. Reasons are typically not given, except in the case of a refusal, in which case there is an obligation on the authority to provide reasons for the refusal. We've only had one refusal on competition grounds so far under the new law, but all clearances, in theory, are notified on the website of the authority, in its Twitter feed, and also reprinted in the authority's annual report, but only very basic information with no indication of reasons or analysis or anything like that. Saudi Arabia also has a short form procedure, which is a procedure for seeking confirmation from the authority that a long form full merger review is not required. For example, on the grounds that a joint venture is not a full function joint venture, or that a transaction does not have a sufficient nexus to Saudi Arabia. The results of these short form notifications are never published, no matter what the result. It's only the results of the long form full merger review notifications that are published.
Thank you, Chris. And I think it makes it difficult when it's not published to actually have a bit of a steer of what is the authority's position in terms of certain matters, such as joint ventures and that. On that point, I think I will start with you, because we want to talk a little bit about minority shareholding and where does the Saudi authority stand in terms of minority shareholding?
The Saudi authority issued some guidance last year in relation to its criteria that for notification that there be a change of control. So so it is possible for a minority shareholding to change hands and for there to be a change of control. So it's not the case that there's no notification obligation if there's less than 50% plus one changing hands. What the authority looks at is a change of control, no matter what the percentage. And to that end, the authority has imported a version of the European decisive influence test. And they assess transactions, or whether or not there's a change of control in a transaction, by reference to those standards, and quite often it results in transactions with a minority shareholdings changing hands being deemed to be notifiable.
Thank you, Chris. Nesrine, how are minority shareholders tackled in Morocco?
Well, listen, here, when it comes to minority shareholders, I will respond again, taking into consideration the latest position of the Competition Council. So according to the Competition Council, an exclusive control may result from a minority shareholder when specific rights are attached to specific shares, like veto rights or preference shares. And we are very often challenged about this question because, as a matter of fact, this question doesn't relate directly to merger control, but most of the case to the abuse of a dominant position or something like that. But in all cases, when it comes to concentration operation, whether by taking a stake or a joint control or even on a contractual basis, and this is addressed by the Competition Council, it is, as a matter of fact, not easy to address this question just by reading the law, but we need, again, to check what is the recent position of the Competition Council, and also go through the analysis of the different decisions to see if this is something that was flagged by the Competition Council, and also read all the guidelines and the reports that are published by the Competition Council. But because inside you will find some guidelines that will lead me again to the necessity on stressing on the importance of risk management that is related to merger control, to a dominant position, or even a situation of economic dependence, which at the end of the day may justify the notification. And let's not forget that whether it should be or not a notification, this is a decision that will be decided and taken by the Competition Council. So please, let's not take a risk.
Yeah, especially that in Morocco, you said there's an examen préliminaire. So, you know, there is a high probability that it would not be something that takes as long as it should.
Exactly, exactly. And in most cases, when you cooperate, when you communicate, when you demonstrate, it will be cleared within the period of 60 days. But you need to do that and to prepare your file thoroughly.
Prepare early, yes. Dr. Khaled, tell us about minority shareholding in Egypt.
Thank you, Mariam. I believe in Egypt there is no mention about minority shareholding in the law or the executive regulations of the law. However, the guidelines issued by the Competition Authority in 2018 mentioned that if you meet the threshold, you have a notification, you have an obligation to notify, unless this is an internal restructuring, and provided that this does not lead to change of control. So the criteria here is the change of control. If there is no change of control and it is an internal restructuring, then there is no obligation to notify. If, on the contrary, this leads to changing control, even if it is an internal restructuring, then there is an obligation to notify the Competition Authority. So I don't think a minority or a majority transaction would be a question. It is the matter of meeting the threshold and the change of control if it is an internal restructuring.
Thank you, Dr. Khaled. And finally, Omar, in the UAE, and on that topic?
Well, the UAE has no specific guidance, whether it was similar to what Dr. Khaled mentioned in Egypt. Really, the UAE looks at the effects test. So if the effect is likely to impact competition, they would consider this sufficient enough for them to take jurisdiction and review the application. The way that you would normally address uncertain areas or where you're not still positive whether you're subject to the transactions scrutiny or not, is that we would file a written form of inquiry with the competition department to understand their position to a certain point, such as minority or such as taking control or not. And you're more likely to expect, when you do submit a written inquiry, you're more likely to expect that the answer coming back will be, yes, we need you to file a full detailed application for economic concentration.
Thank you, Omar. Especially that in the UAE, there's no short form or preliminary filing. So it's just a full-fledged filing with all formalities, which we hope is something that will change. And this brings me now to what we've noticed on different jurisdictions, talking about how their jurisdiction works in terms of formalities, timeline, and all of that. It takes us now in terms of changes. I've noticed that in each jurisdiction, there are anticipated changes, such as in UAE and in Egypt. And Chris has mentioned the changes in December. So let us talk a little bit more about what are the anticipated changes in each jurisdiction and what do you hope to see for best practices. I'd like to start here with the UAE, because I understand that there's big changes coming the way. So Omar, tell us a little bit about what's happening.
Yes, partly I've mentioned this today. So the UAE has undergone changes to many of its laws. So we've seen the companies law, the intellectual property rights laws, the electronic crimes law. A lot of the laws have been changed, or reenacted completely in the years 2021, 2022. And one of the laws that has been on the table of review is the competition protection law. And the competition protection law is really an area where the authority is fairly new. The staff in the department are fairly new. So what they're aspiring to have is not only built from their experiences, but also draw upon international experience. So they're looking forward to have a law which is on par with international standards. So really, where there are formalities that are unnecessary, the aim is to do away with those formalities. Where the threshold for merger control is very limited in terms of powers of the competition department, they aim to look beyond the market share thresholds and introduce possibly aggregate turnover thresholds, as you would have in Egypt and in Saudi Arabia and in Kuwait. So this is yet to be seen, because we haven't seen any draft law. We haven't seen any topics regarding the draft amendments, and we don't know for certain whether this will be effected this year or not. But from our talks with the Ministry of Economy, various departments, we understand that this is coming, and I can't give any dates, but from what I've seen and over the months and years working with the competition department, there are many areas that they have highlighted to us that those areas will be changed as soon as an amendment to the law takes place. And those areas in the competition department's priority will be merger control thresholds, processes, and questions to answers to the questions that you've raised today, whether it has to deal with minority, has to deal with foreign to foreign transactions. So hopefully those will be clarified either in the amendment to the law or in guidelines to be released by the competition department.
Thank you, Omar. Dr. Khaled, tell us a little bit. I know you've talked about some changes happening, but in just a brief nutshell, what are you expecting that should cover in the new amendments?
Well, thank you, Mariam. I have three updates to share with you today. The first one is regarding the new banking law in Egypt, where it was stated clearly that the banking sector is not subject to the competition law. And competition regulations are issued by the central bank according to the banking law. This includes as well the M&A's control. And accordingly, any merger that is taking place in the banking sector would be under the Central Bank of Egypt and not under the Competition Authority. And this is since the adoption of the new banking law in 2020. The second is the Prime Minister's decree. Actually, the Competition Authority in Egypt is under the Prime Minister's office. And the Prime Minister used to delegate the Minister of Trade and Industry in his powers in this regard. However, this has been withdrawn a couple of months ago, and now the Prime Minister himself is overlooking the Competition Authority. So this is again an important change, because since the establishment of the Competition Authority, it used to be the powers of the Prime Minister used to be delegated to the Minister of Trade and Industry, and after 17 years now they are withdrawn and it is back to the Prime Minister himself.
Thank you, Dr. Khaled. Yeah.
The third is regarding the changes to the mergers and acquisitions control, and I believe the amendments are now published in all the newspapers and by the Competition Authority itself. They are talking about a pre-merger control. It was suggested that the threshold is 9 million EGP of the annual turnover or the combined assets of the parties to the transaction, provided that any one of the parties to the transaction, the annual turnover does not exceed 200 million EGP. So we have like two criteria in order to decide the notifiable transactions. As to the worldwide transactions, the threshold is 7.5 billion EGP, which is almost 375 million US dollars. And provided that, again, the second criteria, which is an annual turnover of an Egyptian entity does not exceed 200 million Egyptian pounds, which is almost 10 million US dollars. In that case, if these amendments are approved, then all mergers and acquisitions would be notifiable to the Competition Authority if they meet the threshold stated by the law. And just to mention here that there is a transitional period whereby all the transactions that started and are not concluded before the adoption of the new amendments, then they'll be subject to pre-approval from the Competition Authority. So if they are not concluded, they have to notify and to await the Competition Authority's decision in this regard. We expect that these amendments are adopted and promulgated by the Parliament by end of this year. They have been under discussion for almost a couple of years now, and the Competition Authority is pushing to have these amendments in place by end of this year. So this is just an important note, because if you start the transaction today and then in a couple of months you did not conclude the transaction and the new amendments are in place, then you have to notify and to wait the decision of the Competition Authority, be it an approval or a conditional approval of the transaction itself, or even a rejection of the transaction.
Thank you, Dr. Khaled. Chris, I understand there's changes you've mentioned before in December 2022.
Yes, that's right, Mariam. As things stand right now, only the powers of attorney of the parties need to be legalized, but that is a full long-form legalization through executing before a notary, a Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the home country, Saudi Embassy in the home country, followed by Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Riyadh and Ministry of Justice in Riyadh. However, in December, Saudi Arabia will start to apply the Apostille Convention, which should speed up the legalization process for powers of attorney, which are the only documents that under current practice of the authority need to be legalized. That's one change that will be coming in. As mentioned before, the authority has made great improvements in timings to clearance. They're now on average 7 to 9 weeks, sometimes as quick as 3.5 weeks. But we understand the authority's goal is to get the average time down to 20 days, so just under 3 weeks. And so we look forward to the authority making further progress towards that goal.
Thank you, Chris. Nesrine, I'm not sure, are there any anticipated changes in Morocco?
Merci, Mariam. Actually, there is a lot of change that are happening and also coming. So first, the first one that I will mention, I think it is an opportunity for all the people that they did not made the filing when it was required. The first one I will call an amnesty that will allow company that had not notified to do so. So I really urge all the companies that they didn't to do it. Why? Because this regularization process will take form of transactional procedures accompanied by a penalty, but that penalty will be capped at 1% of the turnover instead of the maximum of 5% that is provided by the law. So I think this is worth mentioning, and this has just been decided by the Moroccan Competition Council. The second change that happened recently is the guide that has been published by the Moroccan Competition Council to setting up a compliance program competition within the companies, but also professional organization that needs to be respected. So I think that proper training will be needed and it needs to be conducted. Last but not least, I will mention the draft law. 2 bills were proposed in June, amending both the law and the Competition Council. I think it's worth mentioning that within a period of time, not exceeding 20 years, this will be the 3rd law where the Competition Council in Morocco went from a consultative role to a decisional body. So I think it's a lot of progress that has been made here in Morocco. And in this new law, when it comes to the criteria, only the turnover criteria will be taken in criterion will be taken into consideration. But I don't know yet for sure what will be the threshold that will be decided later. And also another provision that will be enacted that, and this is really interesting to note and to take into consideration, because this provision will put an end to the circumvention of the law by the acquisition of assets spread over a period of time. So stay tuned and be aware of the Moroccan regulation when it comes to the competition law and about the necessity to abide by it and respect it.
Wow, thank you, Nesrine. I mean, definitely we are going to have a follow-up merger control webinar on all the changes once that happens. There's a lot going on here. I'd like to close in a little bit about an important topic that we've had a lot of queries from, which is the cooperation between the competition authorities. To what extent is the level of cooperation, and how does this impact a particular transaction, especially when transactions that are multiple filings in the same transaction, for example, a transaction in UAE has the same transaction in Saudi. Do they cooperate together or not? We just want to hear a little bit about the cooperation between the authorities. This will be our final quick point before we leave the room for questions. So I'd like to start with Dr. Khaled, just in a few words, how is the cooperation going on?
Thank you, Mariam. Very important question. And if you think that you are far away from the Egyptian Competition Authority, I will tell you, no, you are not. they are detecting each and every transaction around the world through cooperation with competition authorities in different jurisdictions. Not just in Africa or not just the Arab countries, but even Europe and US. Egypt has, the Egyptian Competition Authority has concluded a number of cooperation agreements with competition authorities around the region, be it in Africa, like South Africa and Nigeria, or the Arab Competition Network that comprises Jordan, UAE, KSA, Sudan, Iraq, Palestine, Oman, Morocco, Lebanon, and Yemen. Egypt is also a member to the Euromed program, whereby all the countries, member states of the Euromed program, they exchange information and expertise regarding competition matters. I think in December, the chairperson of the Competition Authority announced that they have detected a number of transactions that happen around the world that were not notified to the Competition Authority in Egypt. He didn't name anyone. However, he said that we are going to detect all these through our cooperation with the competition authorities around the world. So through this cooperation, no transaction is hidden anywhere. I think they are all up in the light, and the competition authorities in the region can detect these transactions. And if they are notifiable, then in that case, they'll be in violation to the competition law. One thing, the guidelines mentioned in Egypt that if this transaction is notifiable to a number of competition authorities in different jurisdictions, then this does not preclude or exclude the Egyptian Competition Authority. You have to notify in any case, be it a regional notification to COMESA, for example. If you have an obligation to notify the COMESA, and Egypt is a member to the COMESA market, but you still, again, you have to notify the Egyptian Competition Authority. So a single notification to a competition authority in one jurisdiction does not preclude other notifications to the competition authorities in different jurisdictions, including Egypt.
Thank you, Dr. Khaled. And Chris, in Saudi, I presume GAC is cooperating with some authorities?
Thanks, Mariam. Yes, it is. We know that the authority in Saudi Arabia speaks with other authorities. They've told us so, and there are memorandums in place to formalize the protocols for such communication. We know they talk with authorities in the region as far west as Morocco and as far east as Pakistan. We understand that links are growing through meetings and so on with authorities further afield, such as in Europe, although we're not aware of any formal protocols that have been entered into in relation to communications with the European Commission. But certainly within the region, there are communications between the authorities.
I believe the same is for the UAE, right, Omar?
Yeah, well, UAE has informal communication with other competition authorities. The first formal one that we are aware of is the ACN, as mentioned by Dr. Khaled. The Arab Competition Network launched this year. Actually, this network was an initiative that came from Egypt. So the Egypt authority drove this and reached an agreement with the various competition authorities in the MENA area to bring about the Arab Competition Network. And we think, since this is fairly new, we think that this will have a lot of data shared between the authorities. So as previously, where clients will mention to you that, well, we have filed in Morocco, but we don't think that the authorities in the UAE will know about our filing. I trust post ACN, everything will change. So this ACN is a game changer. It means much more data will be accessed by competition authorities and in terms of transactions being submitted to those countries.
Thank you, Omar. And finally, with Nesrine, I think in addition to the French Competition Authority, Morocco is highly cooperative with other authorities, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, Mariam. And I agree with what my esteemed colleague said about the cooperation level that is conducted not only with Saudi, Egypt, and other parts or country of the MENA region. But I will stress first on the cooperation level when it comes to Africa. You know, today for Morocco, being part of the African Union and being the door to Africa is very important and very strategic. So all sets of laws today in Morocco evolve around that. So whenever there is an amendment that needs to be taken or a modification to be introduced, it is done to reinforce that cooperation between African countries. So that's first. Second of all, I will stress, as you say, yes, the cooperation with the French authorities are very important because let's not forget that the Moroccan legal framework is largely inspired from the French law, but also taking into consideration the advanced status of Morocco with the European Union. So the cooperation in this level with the European Commission is very important, not only in terms of filing and investigation, etc., but also in terms of the training of the members of the Competition Council, where a lot of training are conducted in order not only to bring up to speed, but to reinforce the ability of the Moroccan Competition Council that is really very active and competent in terms of dealing with this kind of transaction.
Thank you, Nesrine. Thank you, everyone. I think this concludes our Q&A sessions internally between amongst ourselves to give you this interactive session. Definitely, there's a lot of topics that we'd like to cover, which we will cover in subsequent sessions. We just want to answer. We had answered already one of the previous Q&As. Chris had answered that, but we wanted to answer a certain question that came to us in the chat box related to joint ventures. Basically, I'll read the question out loud. What about joint ventures if they fall on the scope of merger control regimes and if there's any JV decision to date in these countries? If we can shed the light on that, I'll leave the floor first to Chris and Saudi to let us know about the scope and JVs.
Thanks, Mariam. Yes, joint ventures are notifiable. Any transaction that leads to a combination of management between two parties, such as the formation of a joint venture company, is prima facie notifiable unless there's a relevant exception. One exception that's relevant in the context of joint ventures is if the joint venture is not a non-full function joint venture, and that's probably the most common reason for using the short form notification procedure is to seek the authorities' confirmation via a short form notification that a joint venture is not a full function joint venture. There have been many notifications of joint ventures in Saudi Arabia, and also many short form notifications in circumstances where the joint venture being formed is non-full function. So to answer the question for Saudi Arabia, yes, they are prima facie notifiable unless an exception exists.
Thank you, Chris. And Omar, for the UAE?
Yes, for the UAE, the joint ventures are included, obviously, where there is a transfer of assets or usage rights, because the economic concentration definition really includes all forms of two or more entities coming together by way of a merger, acquisition, JV, or even other forms, where you have even usage rights that are transferred by way of a license agreement. When you're talking about a company that is built around software technology and that license is being given to another country, where transfer of usage rights is occurring to a new company or to third party, then that will be considered economic concentration. So no doubt JVs are included.
And Nesrine, I believe it's the same in Morocco?
Absolutely, absolutely. It is the same in Morocco. And since the question was inquiring specifically if there is any decision or communication from the Competition Council about GVs, I was checking at the same time, and yes, it is publicly available. So either the person can write to us directly, and we share with them the communication of the Moroccan Competition Council. Most of the time, we can share this kind of info. They are publicly available.
Thank you, Nesrine. And Dr. Khaled?
Thank you, Mariam. And contrary to what my colleagues stated regarding the jurisdictions in Egypt, it's not clear about joint ventures. We don't have clear cut answer for that. However, according to the definition of persons under the Egyptian competition law, a joint venture would be considered as one person. Because the definition of persons define persons as a group of persons or a group of capital. So in that case, if we have a joint venture, from a competition perspective, that would be viewed as one person and not two different persons coming together as merger or acquisition. And accordingly, the definition would be the criteria here. Are they defined as one person, and accordingly, they are not subject to notification, or they are defined as two different entities, and in that case, they'll be subject to notification. But still, there is no clear practice here in Egypt. There is no guidelines in this regard. And if you're asking me personally, I would say that based on the definition of the law, they would be considered as a joint venture would be considered as one person, and there is no need for notification.
Thank you, Dr. Khaled. Thank you. I believe this concludes our session today, which we hope it was useful. As you can see, everything is developing really fast, and we're anticipating lots of changes happening in the coming months. And we will definitely be having a follow-up webinar to cover what are actually these changes. Definitely, if you would like in the meantime to send us any queries you have or follow up on queries that you have, that will be great. We'll be happy to address them. And we hope to see you again soon in any other of our webinars. And if any of our speakers want to have any final words, I will allow them to give some of them.
Thank you, Mariam. It's terrific to have this webinar. And like you said, we will aim to have more as changes are anticipated in many countries, as we've heard today.
If you allow me, I want to thank Mariam for the great moderation. Thank you, Mariam.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes,
Merci,
Nesrine.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank you, Mariam, as well. And I would like to add one small comment here, that cooperation is growing between countries, including Egypt for the time being. Now we have twinning program, whereby Egypt has a twinning with the German Competition Authority and the Lithuanian Competition Authority. So I believe by this, more of the Arab countries will be having this twinning programs under the Euromed program and under the EU association agreements. So again, I believe the merger and acquisition control will be coming up more often in the future, especially with the amendments in the region and the cooperation between the competition authorities around the region and with other competition authorities in different jurisdictions in Europe and in the US.
Thank you, Dr. Khaled.
I really thank you, Mariam, for this excellent.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.